Hey guys, Seth Smith here. Welcome to the Remain podcast. I'm here today with Eric Eberth, and we're getting ready to talk about his testimony. Enjoy. What's up, man?
Good afternoon. Good to see you, buddy.
How are you?
I'm feeling blessed. Glad to be here again.
Good. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
I have to say, man, I'm real excited about talking to you today. My wife's probably tired of me talking about it this week. But I listened to your podcast with Pastor Chris a couple months ago.
Okay.
And thoroughly enjoyed the podcast. I think he kind of sprung that one on you, right?
That was a little bit of an ambush. When I came in, I had no idea that I was going into Joe Rogan's studio in here, so I was a little more prepared to meet with you today, so I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, they have a nice setup here, for sure.
Absolutely.
It's very professional, so fortunate to be able to use it. But for me, I'm big into podcasts in general. Most of the people that's listened so far have kind of got the gist of that.
Okay. I've enjoyed them as well.
So I like interviewing cool people, and I'm really into talking to veterans. I know you were at the Veterans Dinner last year that the Young Adult Ministry did.
Absolutely, and thank you again for that.
Yeah, for sure. We love doing it. We're looking forward to doing it in November. We'll bring more food this time. I think you guys have grown, I think, from what I understand.
Well, that's one thing where veterans are famous for. We can put food away, so
Okay.
it's all right.
All right, good deal. Well, we're looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome.
Good.
One of the guys I listen to a lot is Jocko Willink, and I think
Absolutely.
You familiar with Jocko?
I am.
Okay.
It's almost hard for me to admit because never being a Navy SEAL, I did go to SEAL school for the first 3 weeks, and we all make fun of them, maybe because deep down we're jealous, but we always say that the only people that are impressed with Navy SEALs are civilians who have never been in the military and other Navy SEAls. But that's just a joke.
Okay.
But I did actually read his book. I do enjoy his podcast. So I have to say, yes, I'm a fan.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like it.
Pains me to say that.
I like what he's done with kind of bringing attention to people who might not have gotten to tell their story, and I think that's pretty awesome. I'm super interested in it. There's another one I listened to, the American Veterans Center on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever heard that one or not, but
I don't think I have.
If you haven't, you should definitely check that out. It's they just have veterans on, they tell their stories, and I've always been super interested in military and military history, and so I wanted to have you on today and kind of talk about some of your history.
All right, bring it on.
From my understanding, you were a 3-branch military.
I was, and that's a little hard to explain, and I don't know if we have all the time in the world for this, but I had never really even thought about the military growing up. My great-grandfather had served in World War II and never said anything about it. It wasn't a topic of discussion growing up in Oregon. It's kind of a liberal state, so teachers don't push it. It's not really something anybody talks about. And, of course, you play Army in the backyard and everybody has fun, but I had no intention. But I'll tell you that at the end of high school, I had a bunch of sports scholarships, and I was a little nervous as to what my future held. And so I went to the only recruiter in town, which was the Air Force recruiter, and said, you know what, let's go have an adventure. And I hadn't planned on doing it for a lifetime. I wanted to go and do 2 or 4 years, travel the world, maybe get some money for college, and just have some fun. And so that's what I did. I signed up, raised my right hand, have nothing bad to say about the Air Force. Great people, great travel, great equipment. But very quickly I realized that I enjoyed it. I love the esprit de corps. I love the camaraderie. I like the travel. There's not a lot of other jobs where you sign up and then within a couple months you're in Germany or Korea or Japan or places more exotic like Iraq and Afghanistan, but that's another story. And so I decided I wanted to stay with it. I went off to the Marine Corps after that because I wanted a little bit more of a challenge. We'll circle back to this later, but everyone always asks me what's the best service, and you have to experience it for yourself. I can't direct anybody any which way, but I wanted to test myself a little bit more. I wanted to experience a little more of a challenge, so I took my commissioning in the Marine Corps with the intention of being a pilot. And great again. Love the Marine Corps, love everybody there. Very motivated people, run through a brick wall if you ask them to. I was one of them. I don't know why, but I would have done it too. But after September 11th, I was pulled out of flight school, became an infantry officer. No regrets, loved every minute of that also. But that's the reason I switched one more time, is because at the end of that commitment, I still wanted to fly. That was another goal I had, that I wanted to get my flight wings and fly for my country as well. And so I switched one more time to the Army, because they were accepting pilots. So I switched, went through flight school, got my wings. I flew the Apache for about 5 years, and that was just another great experience. And I would have stayed in for a whole career, but I unfortunately was injured in Iraq in 2008, 2009, woke up in a hospital somewhere. But I have 10 fingers and 10 toes, so I'm still very blessed.
Well, I definitely want to get to that. But let's go back kind of to the beginning here.
Okay.
Your average person, I don't think, is going to go 3-branch military service.
No,
right?
most people are much smarter than me. You're right.
Well,
Yes.
I would say that. But so, like, what's your childhood as a kid? Like, what does that look like kind of growing up? Like, what was because you're from originally Salem, Oregon, right?
I'm originally from Oregon. You're right.
Okay.
And I had a great childhood. Oregon's a great place to grow up. I kind of make fun of it being a liberal place, but it wasn't really that bad. I had hunting, fishing, all the sports you can imagine, great friends. It was a safe place. You could ride your bike all hours of the night with your friends, and it was a good place to grow up. So I have no regrets, and if my mom's watching, I still have no problem with Salem, Oregon. If I could move back, I would, but God has never sent me back there yet. So I'll see you when I see you, Mom.
Are you a football fan?
I'm not actually.
Oh, okay. I'm an Oregon Ducks fan.
Okay.
So that's yeah.
That's okay.
Go Ducks, but
I have a lot of friends who are as well.
So as a kid, I mean, you said your grandpa served in World War II, right?
Correct.
Did you get to meet your grandpa?
I did. And again, I didn't know this until I joined the service. And then he kind of brought it. It was like, oh, yeah, by the way.
Oh, so it wasn't something that like you talked about as a kid?
No,
or
as a
heard
kid, he
stories,
didn't bring out any memorabilia or tell any stories. It was not even an issue.
Wow.
Yeah. It wasn't until I actually joined the service that he said, oh, yeah, by the way, did you know I was in the Navy? And he told me a story. Actually, he wanted to be a pilot also. And I think he said he got 3 flight hours. And he said he slammed a plane onto the runway, and it bounced off the runway, and it bounced back on the runway. And when they finally came to a stop, they said, okay, well, you're not pilot material. And that was the end of his flight school time.
So what did he do in the service or in the war?
He was in the Navy, so he did whatever he was told. He was a gunner's mate, and he did a lot of different things. But that was probably the only story you told me.
Okay.
Was the time he wanted to be a pilot and unfortunately washed himself out by almost crashing a plane.
Okay. So when you're growing up, at kind of what point did you think that the military might be the way? You said you liked outdoors and stuff. Were you into like guns then, hunting, that type of stuff, or no?
Not in a big way. I was into sports, baseball, basketball, football. I liked to swim. I did like to camp growing up, but I wouldn't say the military was big on my radar.
No.
That's the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not until you got towards the end of high school?
No, not till I was actually graduated high school and I
right.
was actually sitting down making these decisions. Where are you going to go to school? What happens after you go to school? And this is a funny story also that maybe I shouldn't have looked too far in the future because as a young man, everybody feels invincible. And so speaking with other athletes or we're talking about our scholarships and everyone just assumed that after they played college ball, they'd go be professional athletes.
Right, don't we all?
And I think I was the only skeptic. I was like, well, what happens if I don't become a professional ball player? And some of the coaches and some of the other athletes like, well, what do you mean? Why would you even ask that question? Of course you're going to be. And I was like, well, okay. And so that was the first little bee in my bonnet, I guess you'd say, that God placed is like, okay, maybe if you don't be a professional athlete, maybe have a backup plan.
Okay.
And that's when I started talking to the recruiter.
What sports did you play?
Baseball was mainly what I was going to go to college for.
Okay.
Yeah.
What position?
Wasn't big enough for football and not tall enough for basketball.
Wasn't big enough for football. You're a lot bigger than me. What position did you play in baseball?
Shortstop and second base.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Were you a Chipper Jones fan back in the day?
I was.
Yeah,
I was a consistent batter. I didn't hit a lot of home runs, or any home runs, that's the truth. But if you can just consistently get on base, then you can help the team win games.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So how long you say you went to the Air Force first, correct?
Correct. So I was enlisted in the Air Force for 4 years.
Okay.
Yep. And then I fulfilled that commitment. And then I switched and I went to officer candidate school in the Marine Corps. And that's how I started my journey with the Marine Corps. Got my commissioning, went off to flight school. And like I said, that I didn't actually get to finish flight school. September 11th kind of changed a lot of people's lives. So I got pulled out of that, went back to, they call it IOBC, or Infantry Officer Basic Course in Quantico, Virginia, and became an infantry officer instead.
Okay.
And
so
loved every minute of that as well.
Okay. Speaking of 9/11, do you remember where you were when that happened?
I was in flight school in Pensacola, Florida.
Okay.
And it was just another day, and It's hard to remember at this point, but there was a time where we were not at war.
Right.
And that we just had a peacetime mission, and that being in the military was preparing for war. And people forget this, and it's unfortunate for a lot of people who joined after 9/11, is that the military has just been going from one conflict to the next, and you go to Iraq and you come home for a year, and then you go to Afghanistan, then you come home for a year, and then it's just this, I can't even keep up. There's some friends of mine who've been in the service for a while. It used to be that you would say, oh, I got 2 tours, or I got 3 tours, this and that. People are now saying like, oh yeah, I got 9 tours, I got 11 tours. And so it's been a long road right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when 9/11 happened, I guess at that point you knew some things were going to change. Yeah, you're going to be.
I did, and again, the Marine Corps is a wonderful place full of wonderful people, and like I said, you'll run through a brick wall if you're asked to, and so there was never a fear. It was more of a, if you've been training to go to the World Series, now the World Series is here. And so it was more of an excitement. It was
Right.
let me at 'em type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So how many tours did you do overseas?
I did 5 total. So I did 3 in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And then countless little trips to Bosnia, Kosovo, and all over the Horn of Africa. I don't actually know where I was, but I know it was somewhere in the Horn of Africa there.
Okay.
Yeah.
How different were your tours? From some of the people I've heard talk, Afghanistan and Iraq were 2 very different places to be.
Well, not only geographically, the people is completely different, but as time went on, the conflicts are totally different too. And I feel like I'm talking about things that are way above my pay grade, but you go from a lot of conflict to a little conflict, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're being sent to Iraq as a policeman. You're not actually there as a combatant anymore. You're just there as a policeman to look out in case I get shot at. Your mission's changed. Instead of getting a briefing saying, we're going here, we're going to find these people, we're going to get them, to we're just going to go on patrol, and if somebody shoots at us, then we're going to shoot back, and then we might go explore this village. So it turned into a police action really quick.
And that was more in Iraq?
Correct,
versus
yeah.
Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Gotcha. I guess the first place you went was Afghanistan, correct?
No, first tour was actually Iraq.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long was your first tour?
All of them are just roughly about a year.
Okay.
Yeah, just shy of a year.
Okay.
Usually 11 months and some days, and then you come back.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so from a believer standpoint, I mean, I don't know how many guys you served with that were believers. Were you kind of the Lone Ranger out there with the belief, or was there a lot of guys with you that had the faith?
Every unit is different.
You're good, man. No worries. You're a busy man, I know.
That's all right. Every unit's different, and God does not make mistakes. You'll always find somebody to encourage you, to strengthen you, because you're right. Sometimes you will feel all by yourself, and it's not as you don't feel as lonely actually when you're in a deployed situation. What I mean by that is when you're stateside and nobody's shooting at you and everybody's having a good time, you can feel lonely as a Christian in your daily walk because there's a lot of temptation and there's a lot of ways that young men and women can get themselves into trouble with alcohol and the clubs and you name it. There's a lot of different things you can do to get yourself into trouble, and that's when you probably feel the most alone, is because you'll feel this wave of people wanting to go drinking or wanting to go to the club, and sometimes you can feel like that wave's crashing over you and you're just trying to resist and you're just trying to be a good influence, and I've had many phone calls to pick people up from the bars or the clubs or things like that, and I've never had any problem with that and never shirked my duties, but you do feel kind of alone, like everyone else is doing one thing and I'm the only one doing this thing. Now, when you get deployed, people are very eager to talk to you. Now, they'll recognize, they'll see that I wasn't doing the things that everyone else was doing when we were back in America, in garrison, everything's safe. You know what? I don't remember Eric drinking and throwing up. I don't remember Eric at the club with us that one time. And so then those things become you kind of get under a microscope when you're deployed, because now those temptations aren't there. Your families aren't there. Your girlfriend, your wife, your kids, your buddies. Sometimes all that is gone, and all you have is a scary situation where you don't know if you're coming home. And all of a sudden, that's when you start to question yourself, and maybe people will start to seek out a Christian and be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you believe about that? I see you're not overly nervous right now. What is it that makes you motivated? And I feel very fortunate to have been part of a lot of baptisms in the deserts where you dig a hole, you put a tarp in it, you fill it full of water, and the chaplain will come and people will give their lives to Christ.
Wow.
In a puddle in the desert.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you feel like maybe some of that, I mean, like kind of goes to the thing where, like a lot of people, when they're at a funeral, they'll start thinking about death. And then that's kind of almost an opportune time after to speak to people about eternity. Do you feel like on deployment that kind of has the same vibe, I guess, as people are?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had I think he was a E4, a young man came up to me and he kind of asked, he's like, so if I live through this, is there anything to be afraid of ever again?
Wow.
And it kind of hit me. I was like, well, I mean, you're right. We're right at the edge of looking at the abyss. So what do you want to talk about? And that kind of opened up a conversation. Like, why is it so scary right now? Why do you think this is scarier? And he said, because I could die at any moment. I was like, okay, and what happens then? And that kind of opened up the conversation that his grandmother took him to church, and then he kind of fell away from it, and he knows what's right and wrong, but he didn't want to do it. And of course, it's hard when you're in the service, and everyone else is flexing their muscles and getting the girls and drinking the beers, and you want to be like everyone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember kind of like your first, I guess, experience with actual combat? Do you remember?
I don't know. Everyone says it just starts to blend together after a while, but there wasn't like a real grand moment because, and again, this is full disclosure, it's not like the war movies you watch. Mm-hmm. It's not like the sky erupts and all of a sudden there's tons of machine gun fire and all your guys are shooting and there's 100 guys shooting back at you. Most of the time it's less, I wouldn't say anticlimactic because it's still scary, but an RPG will hit the vehicle and a vehicle will blow up, and then you'll take contact, everybody will get out of the vehicles, and the firefight will last maybe 60 seconds. 2 minutes is like a long firefight. Mm-hmm. And in those times, you practice it so many times, the difference between training and the real thing, you might not think it's a big deal, but you've done it so many times, it's just muscle memory. Mm-hmm. But it's not every single time is completely different. And this is, again, I feel like I'm talking above my pay grade, but all the studies show that it really only happens a couple times where your heart rate goes up and you're scared and you're running and you're shooting. Every time after that, they say, okay, your heart rate just kind of just stays at the bottom because you've done this so many times. You just kind of react and just do what you're told again and again and again. Yeah.
I know you had mentioned earlier, and you've talked about this, if you saw the episode with Pastor Chris on the Faith Fellowship episode, you gave us your testimony about what the Lord did in your life. So do you mind sharing kind of some of that with us?
No, absolutely. So maybe that's probably the scariest thing I've been through is not the noise or the bombs or the guns or anything like that. It was, I don't know how much we're going to fast forward through. So
we're here. We got time. Take me through that day. Take me through that day that you can.
I was riding in the back of a vehicle that was blown up, and I don't remember it.
Were you just on patrol?
Yep, I don't remember it. I was riding in the back. I'm not driving. I'm just in one of the positions looking for security. The vehicle blew up, and I woke up in the state of Washington in a hospital, and that's a little scary in itself. But okay, no big deal. I've been through that before with like, how many fingers am I holding up? Are you okay? All right, get back to it. Well, this was different because it had been a couple days and I don't remember any of it, but woke up in the hospital and I was told that I was told I wouldn't walk again. And that's a scary thing. And it doesn't hit you at once. It's not like it wasn't the gravity of it didn't hit me immediately. It was kind of like, huh, that's weird. And then as you're sitting in your hospital bed and people are coming and going, and it starts to like slowly creep in on you. And it's kind of the enemy whispering in your ear about everything you're going to miss out on. And then the depression kind of sets in, and you're by yourself too. So there's nobody from your unit. There's no family. There's no friends. You're in the hospital entirely by yourself. And the nurses and the doctors are tremendous, and I don't want to shortchange them. They are absolutely the best of the best. But sitting by yourself, and you can only watch so many shows on TV and so many YouTube videos and read so many magazines, and the depression starts to set in. And I'll be the first to admit that I cried many tears, many times. You try and hide it from everyone because you're in a hospital full of other tough guys, but I cried. I'll admit it. And somewhere in there, you have to make a choice. And I saw this all around me every single day is some people chose to just dive headfirst into that depression. And this isn't just a military thing. This is kind of a societal thing with being a victim. And this is, I just have bad luck, or I'm cursed, or whatever it happens to be, and you accept this fate. And I wasn't delusional, but I felt and believed that there was power still there, that God could still do anything. And that comfort of just believing that it's possible was, I think, the first step in the right direction. And that's hard. I say that very flippantly right now, that you just believe in that first step, but that probably took me a couple weeks to even believe that I'm not going to be like this forever, that God could do anything, and that God's not done using me, and that there are many things that I could do even if I do stay in a wheelchair the rest of my life. And so one physical therapy session after another, and doctors saying that it's a waste of time for this, and then other doctors are encouraging you, and so you're not always getting the encouragement from the medical professionals either. So sometimes it's just you and your Bible and your quiet time, and Pastor Gary mentioned that in church on Sunday. Sometimes the most important times we have is that quiet, that calm time to just listen. And maybe that was the greatest blessing too, is that you go from a life that's going 90 miles an hour at all times, deployment after deployment, exercises, you're just always on call, you're always going fast, you're always looking for that next adrenaline rush almost. Mm-hmm. And now you can't even walk, so you're just in your hospital bed and you have nothing but time. And maybe the best thing I ever did was turn off the TV and just sit. And that's when I learned to meditate. And the medical professionals do give you all the tools in the world with meditation and acupuncture and anything you want. So that was a blessing. But long story short, after about somewhere in between 6 or 8 months, was able to start walking. It wasn't just walking either. Sometimes those of you who know me, who've spoken to me before, know I'll stutter my words sometimes. So that was also part of the spinal cord and brain injury, is that sometimes I'll stutter. It took me a while to get the dexterity back in my fingers so I could, use forks and just be a regular person again. I would love to say that I put in the work and that it was my determination and grit, but no, it was God. There was nothing I could say that I did. I just believed, and then God walked with me, and in my records it says medical anomaly, but
really?
That's just what medical people say about miracles.
This is true. I work in the medical field, so
okay.
I'm familiar with it. Yes, sir. Do you feel like, so when they come in and they tell you, you wake up, and were you alone when you woke up? Do you remember? You were? I'm sure that was terrifying to just wake up in a place, and you don't remember what happened, right? You said.
I remember being on patrol. I remember what route we were on, but no, I don't.
And then it's just like it goes black after that. When you wake up and you're alone, and I guess then they come in, right? And do they tell you anything when they come in? They give you, this is what happened. Is it a while before you find out what happens?
Well, no, the nurses told me immediately. They're like, "Oh, you were in an accident. You're here." They gave me the big gist of it, but it wasn't until they brought the doctor in that they said, "Okay, this is what your spine looks like. This is what your brain looks like. We're going to have this operation. You've already had these 2 operations. So I didn't even remember that. I'd already had 2 operations before I even woke up.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Do you recall a time, so when they give you, this is the prognosis, this is where we stand, because I know in the medical field they're very matter of fact, this is what it is. Do you, once you kind of got through that initial time, do you feel like there was a time thereafter where you're like, no, like this is going to be different because I'm believing in the Lord? Do you feel like that was, I don't know, like where were you at with your walk of faith at that point, I guess? Were you like, I know I'm going to be okay, the Lord's going to get me through this? Or was it one of the, I mean, I guess kind of explain to me where you were with your...
So I would love to tell you that I was just strong Christian from the beginning to end, but no, it's a shock. And like I said, I cried and I felt sorry for myself, and I honestly had no answers. All I had was that depression, and that's all I had. That was my only friend. And then somewhere... And it wasn't just a light bulb. It was a slow transition to believe that it was possible. And this is what I tell people, even to this day, it's getting in your Bible every day. You need to build that spiritual muscle every single day, because just like your physical muscles, it'll atrophy. You'll get weak. And maybe I was a little weak in the military. I don't know. But this was a real shot to my faith and to my strength as a man, as a warrior, as a Christian, as everything was kind of, I was brought literally to a complete stop. Everything I believed, everything I thought, every plan I had for the future, I was told in one instant, no, none of that now. You need to completely reevaluate your entire life. What are you going to do now? And so that's when the decision happens. And that still small voice says, maybe you can walk again. Maybe if you just believe you can walk again. Maybe. And you have to say no to the depression and start that. And this was a literal walk in this case.
So it sounds like a lot of that stem from your devotion time with the Lord in a hospital bed. Is that right? On the day-to-day. Just you and the Lord. It sounds like a lot. Man, that speaks volumes to just spending time on the Word, and that's awesome. But now, I mean, I would have never known that story just knowing you now. Like you work out all the time, right? You hit in the gym.
Not as much
9 days a week.
Yeah. I should. Yes, I should.
But you have like no deficits or anything on that. I mean, you're lifting like normal.
I would love to lie to you and tell you that I'm 100%, but nobody's really 100%. Everybody struggles with something. Today I was able to work out. Sometimes I still face headaches, and it was actually just last week that I had a migraine where I lost the eyesight in my left eye, but you just got to keep going, watch your nutrition. This is the other thing. Some people would say that I'm a gym rat, but actually I'm at a point in my life where you actually you got to work out a little bit just to make sure that your legs still work. So.
Okay. Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. You a home gym kind of guy, or you go to a gym?
Whatever I can do.
Okay.
So I travel sometimes for work, so I'll work out in the hotels, and I have a membership to the YMCA here, and I do have a home gym at home too. So
okay,
whatever I have time to do, and then I'm just trying to keep up with my kids these days.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah,
that keeps you busy, right?
That's
there.
right.
Now, we mentioned briefly about your time. You corrected me earlier because I used the wrong terms. So I want to use the right term this time, special operations. You were
Correct.
involved with special operations.
I was. The reason I corrected you is because a lot of people just say special forces as this blanket statement for everybody. Just call a spade a spade. Special forces is United States Army. Special forces is what you'd know as Green Berets. The special operations umbrella would cover Navy SEALs and Rangers and Raiders and Force Recon and pararescue, combat controllers. The list goes on and on and on. TACP, all those other specialties are under the special operations umbrella.
Okay, gotcha. And what was your role exactly in that?
Well, when I was told I wouldn't be able to fly and I became an infantry officer, I was able to go to Raiders training. And this is another long story, so Marine Special Operations Command was kind of in a hiatus at this point because things happen. Sometimes Marines don't like to play well in the sandbox with others, so we call it MARSOC. But Marine Special Operations Command is now underneath the Special Operations Command of the United States now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. What's the selection process look like that on that? Just out of curiosity.
Just like anything, the military will give you every bit of pain that you want. And once you think you've reached a certain level, there's something else you can volunteer for. There's another training you can go to. So this is one of those things where they had recruiters going around saying, hey, you think you're tough? Do you think you're this tough? And so you go and you do your qualifications, your swim qualifications, your running qualifications. And that's just to see if you can go to the tryouts. And then you go to the tryouts and you make it through a certain point. Then they say, okay, you guys are actually going to go through the training course.
Okay. How long is the selection process on that?
I think it's 16 weeks is total to actually say you made it through the pipeline. But then once you've made it that far, the training still continues. Now you're part of this group. And now, so to give you an idea, like everybody's probably seen the Navy SEALs on Discovery Channel, and they'll go through the SEAL training in Coronado, and then at the end they say, yeah, you're a Navy SEAL. Well, you're really just beginning at that point. Now you actually have to go and learn this stuff.
Right.
Now you have to go to the rifle range. Now you have to go and do your scuba. So you actually learn the skills. So the military has a fun way of weeding people out by just making things horrible for a while. And if you survive the horrible part, okay, now we're going to teach you some new skills. Okay. But you have to prove that you can just gut it out a little bit first.
Gotcha. So once you finished and you were selected at that point.
Correct.
From there, did you go on deployment right after that, or were you?
Well, no, because you go to a training base first,
mm-hmm.
and then once you make it through all the training, then you'll get orders. What they say, just orders. So it comes up from the Department of Defense, and they'll decide where you need to go. So then you'll get assigned to a base, to a unit, and so you'll go to Camp Lejeune or Camp Pendleton and go assign to a unit. And then once you go assign into your unit, that's actually where you'll train with those guys in garrison before you get to a deployment.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were deployed at the time of your injury, were you deployed as this is probably the dumbest way to ask this question, but as a Marine Raider at that point? Were you part of MARSOC then?
When I got injured.
When you got injured?
No. So again, I wish my story was more simple. And again, I don't want to lie to you. So I went from Air Force to the Marine Corps to the Army. So that final deployment, I was actually an Army helicopter pilot.
Okay.
So I'd already got out of the Marine Corps, transitioned to the Army, went through Army flight school, went to an Army unit, then was deployed with an Army unit.
Gotcha.
So,
gotcha. So where were you the day of your injury? Just out of curiosity, where were you guys headed when you came up on the IED? Because you came up on an IED, correct?
Correct. So the whole story is I should have been in the air anyway, but I was riding in the back of a vehicle. And I believe it was Route Dodge in northern Iraq in the city of Mosul, just another place on the map. And that's where the vehicle was blown up. I'm sure it has a different name than Route Dodge. We named everything Route Dodge, Chevy, Ford. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how we keep things straight, so we know how to patrol.
Okay.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the people in the vehicle with you did not make it, right?
That is correct. So 2 people didn't make it. One gentleman doesn't have I believe it's his right arm. And again, this wasn't like my unit, so these weren't my best friends. I was just riding in this vehicle, but I still understand how very blessed I am because I was in the same vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of your testimony by being in the hospital and spending time with the Lord, and I mean, that sounded like it was a huge moment in your life of it's make or break at this point, right? Talking to people who might be struggling with, say, PTSD, for example, could you speak on that in the sense of a believer standpoint, someone who might be struggling with that? Because you went one route, and some people don't go that route. I know it's a heavy question.
No, it's a heavy question, but I believe I have to, and I've had to talk about this many times, and I've been blessed and cursed to have been asked this question many times. And I've been asked by the Wounded Warrior Project and the Department of Veterans Affairs and a couple other organizations to come and speak to other veterans who may still be struggling to get out of that hole. And I say hole because that's how I felt. I felt like I was just in the bottom of a well or in this deep hole, and there was no getting out. I don't know how I was ever going to live life. I'll never drive a car again. I'll probably never have a girlfriend again. I'll probably never run or walk or anything.
Right.
I'll just be this cripple guy forever. And the reason this is such a hard thing for me to address is because without faith, I could never imagine getting out of it. And it's only because of my faith and because of my walk with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I was able to get out. And so I see this, and I talk to a lot of different veterans in group atmospheres. Sometimes there'll be a camping trip that'll be sponsored for veterans, and we'll all go out in the woods and whitewater rafting and do these fun things to kind of get your mind off it. And then in the evening, you'll sit around and talk about some of these experiences. And without that foundation, I don't know how you take that first step. Mm-hmm. To rely entirely on this world, to rely on drugs, to rely on medicine, to rely on anything of this world just seems so short-sighted and so empty. And so for some people, they look at me and they're like, oh, well, he's just another one of those Bible thumper guys. And I understand. I understand that a lot of people will say that, but there is nothing else that I believe that can get you out of that place. There's nothing else that can help you. And I'm not talking about overcoming injury, like not being able to walk or growing a limb or anything like that. I just mean post-traumatic stress disorder, constantly reliving the nightmares, constantly reliving an action that happened. And I still went through that too. I would have dreams of something that happened, and sometimes in real life, it wasn't a tragedy. We took fire, we returned fire, everything was fine. But then in your dream, your mind rehashes it again and again. And so in one dream, I get shot, and the next dream, you get shot. And your mind just wants to play it over and over and over and over. And again, if you want to medicate yourself for the rest of your life, you can. And there's some people who are doing that. And I don't see that as a long-term solution for anybody. So every time I'm given these opportunities to speak, I apologize up front, because I tell them I'm not trying to come at you as an evangelist, but I just know this is what helped me, and this is the only thing that I can see that can help anybody.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It's very cool you got to have that, I guess, the opportunities to speak to these people struggling with this, because you mentioned renewing your mind, and the scripture talks about that. You must renew your mind daily. And I mean, if the devil sees an opportunity, I think, to attack people with that, with PTSD, that he's going to do it. And especially if he knows they don't have a foundation in the Word. So that's awesome that you're able to speak to people.
Well, and I tell them the terms I use, because everyone in the service understands working out. Everyone wants to be a tough guy. You want your 3-mile run time to get shorter, and you want your lifts to get heavier, and you do that by a little bit more every week. Mm-hmm. Like, you keep track of your training, so you know, okay, I did 100 push-ups on last Monday. I'm going to see if I can do 105 this week. And I know my 2-mile run time was 12 minutes and 12 seconds this week. I'm going to see if I can get that down to a 12:05 or under, maybe a sub 12 minutes. So you're looking for these little increments all the time. And then over the course of years, that's where strength comes from. And most people in the service understand that. And so I explained it to them again. I didn't say sit down and read your Bible cover to cover today, but take a moment to read a verse. Get the Bible app verse thing on your phone, mm-hmm. and just a little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah.
Then I'll help you graduate, and we'll get into a Bible study group. And then every day we'll read a couple chapters. And then maybe we will even read a book that talks about what do those chapters mean. And then we'll expand. And we're not going to lose sight of the big picture, that it's a little bit. So over the course of 2 years, you won't even recognize yourself. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying the nightmares will go away. I'm not saying I have a magic bullet for anything. But I'm saying that you will not recognize yourself in how you handle every day. Mm-hmm. And I know part of PTSD is, I know a lot of guys who use it as an excuse for just bad behavior.
Right.
And I love every one of you out there, but some of you know I'm talking about you. If you're using PTSD as an excuse to always be drunk, there's a better way. If you're using it as an excuse to be screaming and yelling in traffic, you're like, well, I can't control my temper anymore because I have PTSD. I'm like, okay, I understand that. How can we do a little bit better? Just a little bit better every day.
That's a good word. One thing I did want to ask you about that we talked about before, the world right now is looking at, and I don't want to use certain terms, okay, but what it means to be a man. And what the world is telling us right now, what it is to be a man, is not what the scriptures tell us to be a man. So I kind of wanted to get your insight. I mean, you've gone through a lot of stuff. You've persevered through your injury. You're a father like me. You're a husband. You're a leader. You serve the church. Can you speak a little bit into that on what the scripture is saying about these things versus what the world is telling us now in manhood? And I don't know. Are you familiar with John Lovell? Warrior Poet Society?
I am.
Okay, I got the shirt on, actually.
I noticed. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm a big fan, and I'm reading a book of his right now. It's called The Warrior Poet Way. And it's just talking about leadership and how the world is swaying what it means to be a man and trying to trick people into these things, and it's not what the scriptures teach us, and it's not what we're supposed to be. Yes, we're supposed to be gentle and loving, and that's what the scriptures teach us, but it also teaches us that we're supposed to be fierce and strong and bold. And I just kind of wanted to get someone from your background. I think it'd be cool to speak on that. So,
well, this is another one that I feel like this is way above my pay grade, and if I was to ask somebody who was better than me, I'm not asking special forces guys. I'm not asking weightlifters or tough guys. I'm asking Pastor Gary, Pastor Chris, Pastor Dennis, Pastor Tom. Those are the people I aspire to be more manly. And again, none of those guys are special forces or kicking down doors, but the world has, it's really done a number on what manhood is. So let's take a step back. Manhood is really compartmentalized now. And there's different ways you can be a man, but very few of those have anything to do with the Bible, right? You can be the tough guy, but if you're the tough guy, you can never cry. Or you can be the ladies' man and try and have as many girlfriends as you possibly can, right? But then you don't want to be good with kids. That's a different type. So there's all these different things that the world teaches you. You can be this kind of guy, you can be that kind of guy. But like I said, the only types of manly men I want to be like is Jesus.
That's right.
And the people that are showing me how to emulate that walk are usually the pastors, brothers in Christ like you, Brother Brandon's over here. But I think this is funny because I'll be the first to tell that there's been a lot of guys who think they're tough guys who will look at me do something and raise an eyebrow, be like, I thought Eric was a tough guy. What's he doing over there having a tea party with his daughter and those kids over there? Who said that's not tough guy?
Right.
Who said that's not being a man? Right?
Right.
Now, wait a minute. I heard Eric say he cooked dinner at his house because his wife was at work. That's women's work. Why would Eric be cooking dinner? I'm like, well, I didn't read it anywhere that it said that's not something a man can do either, right? So all these things that try and pigeonhole a man into these roles, I think these are the shackles that Jesus said he was here to break, right? We're here to be free. That to be a man, you can be a good husband and still be a man. You can say, no, I don't want to go out drinking tonight, guys, and still be a man. Now, the guys that are going drinking, they're going to make fun of you. Just accept that. I've accepted that for most of my adult life. Okay, well, the names are going to come. They're going to tell everyone that I wasn't tough enough or I wasn't manly enough to go out and drink or whatever the case might have been that I said no to. And that's fine. But the only goal, the only benchmark I feel like being a man would be Jesus. And I know that's not in vogue these days, but that's okay. I have a daughter and a son to raise, so
that's right.
That's the only goal I have.
What I love about Pastor Gary is, you're talking about him, but Pastor Gary's a man's man,
That's right.
And a lot of my friends they're like, man, I'm not going to church. Like, I'm going to watch football. Like, I'm not going to church, and that's for sissies or whatever they say. And I'm like, man, if you would just come and check it out and meet Pastor Gary one time, you would see that he's a man's man. But I like him because he teaches what the scripture says about what it is to be a man.
That's right.
He teaches strength. He teaches gentleness. He teaches, like you said, just what it is to be Jesus. And I just kind of want to get your insight on that a little bit.
He said that even just this past Sunday about raising a child.
Yeah.
Giving them discipline.
Right.
And that's, again, coming from living in California for the last decade, I feel like that's something that you don't want to say out loud because all of a sudden people not only are going to be thinking poorly of you, they're probably going to be calling the police and Child Protective Service. Like, whoa, Eric's talking about beating his kids. I'm like, nobody said anything about beating their kids.
Right.
Let's stop that right now. But if your kids don't have any discipline, I'm doing them no favors at all.
Exactly. Well, Proverbs says you spare the rod. Actually, one version says you hate the child.
You hate your kids.
Yeah,
that's right.
And that's some harsh words
right
there. But yeah, I like when people say, raising a kid, what's it like? It doesn't come with a manual. Well, it does. It's called the Bible. So if you just read it. But one more thing I want to touch on real quick before we take off. We have some people that are interested in joining the service within our ministry. If you could speak to them on this platform, what would you say to them? They're toying with the idea.
No. And I would speak to any one of you, one-on-one, have lunch, it's on me. And this is something that I've done for many times. So again, my career path was enlisted Air Force, commissioned in the Marine Corps, warrant officer and officer in the Army. And so my perspective is different than anyone else's. And so most people, when they ask me, like, oh, if you had to do it over again, what would you do? I'm like, I'd probably just stay in the Air Force forever. I'd probably just stay in the Air Force, be a pilot, fly, sleep in clean sheets, have a beautiful jet that somebody maintains for me, and that'd be it. But I wouldn't know that unless I did the Marine Corps and the Army, and then I could look back and see the differences. So I would never say anybody, the only answer is this or that, or because of your personality type, you need to do this. I wouldn't say that because I believe that anybody and everybody can rise to any challenge. And sometimes that pressure or that influence on your life to cause you to become something different, something greater than yourself, is what we all need. And so I'm not going to influence anybody to go to one service or the other, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. They're all terrific. I've never met anybody that I've just absolutely hated and said, oh, those Navy guys are all dirty or whatever like that. I just made that up. That's not true. So there's great people in all the branches of service, and I've served with just about everybody, so I could give you some insight in any one of those if you want. And I made fun of the Navy SEALs earlier on, but there's some good guys in the Navy SEALs also.
Well, if you have questions, I'm sure he's not going to mind if you see him at service.
You see me at church.
Ask, and your wife also served, so.
And that's right. And my wife, don't sneak up behind her because she is still a ferocious warrior. She served in the United States Marine Corps, but she'll also be a great asset, especially if you're a lady joining the service, because my experience would be nothing like somebody who was a young lady who wanted to join the service. So I've always loved it to have my wife talk to people about what her experience is, because it was totally different than mine.
Awesome. Well, man, I just want to say thank you for coming on today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Yeah, I've been really excited.
I appreciate it, buddy.
And thank you for your service for the country. I really appreciate it. As personally, as the church, I know. Just thank you for serving.
That's my pleasure.
If you guys have not checked out the social media yet, you can check us out on Instagram at remain_YA. You can also find us on Facebook, Remain. You'll find it on the church website as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, go check it out on YouTube. Hit like, comment, and subscribe. And appreciate you guys. We do our services, young adult services, the first Friday of every month, 6:30 here at the church. You can check that out on the social media. Have a great week.
God bless.